I really have to give the utmost praise and respect to the producer of this record. Her name is Erin Costello, which is a first for me to ever work with a producer in a way where it's like start to finish. We're doing this project. I've learned so much from this process, and Erin Costello has come with a lot of experience and a lot of like musical catalog where we listened to a lot of records together, and like before we even got to the studio, like it was a 6 month process of us getting together like once a week, like once every Sunday or anytime we could, and just really kind of talk through these songs and like the impact that they might have and like how we might approach it, and so I came with most of like these songs as ideas and demos, and like we really sat with each other and fleshed things out, listened to a lot of records, and try to get kind of like a D'Angelo kind of feel of like pulling from different influences, but in a lot of the influences that I'm pulling from are Black Nova Scotian, African Nova Scotian records.
Here in The Cut, we challenge our guests to finish a tub of ice cream before the end of the conversation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. My name is Adriel Smiley. This is A Cool Table Live. If you want to hear the radio show every Wednesday, you can hear at 11 a.m. Eastern, 12:80 a.m. in Toronto, metradio.ca. online. Now we have a special guest join the show for the first time. He has a new album out called 1783. Welcome to the show, Aquakultre.
What's up, cuz? How you doing, man? Thank you for having me. I know that we're not there in person, but I got my Ben and Jerry's just in case we got to bust it open.
Not bust it right open. I want to give a big apologies to Eva's. They are our ice cream sponsor for all of season 3.
Oh,
but they're local. Okay, we couldn't get it out to you even if we wanted to. So bust open that Ben and Jerry's. Let's get started with that. I want to know what flavor you chose as well, because Ben and Jerry's goes crazy with the flavors.
Well, I'm a Aqaukultre guy. Usually, this is my flavor. It was the caramel almond one for a bit, but I had to switch to Aqaukultre because there's something about that vanilla ice cream with the fudge covered waffle cone pieces and caramel swirls. There's something about it.
Man, the ice cream game has gotten very crazy. I think about when I was younger and Breyers had like the Neapolitan. That was like almost as crazy as it could get. And when my favorite ice cream flavor is rum and raisin, personally, of course, see the Jamaican flag flying high. And I felt like that was a crazy flavor growing up. People, if you weren't Jamaican, you didn't know about rum and raisin. Now the game has changed completely.
Grape seed or grape nut was mine back in the day. Yeah. And people always say, "Oh, you're an old person." Every time you eat that, I'm just like, "Cuz it's good. Like it's vanilla with grape nuts. It's fine."
Listen, we can both be old on this podcast together because I think grape nut and rum and raisin, we're the kids who are young and hip that's not what they're into. So we can be old together. When I read up about this album, I thought it was so interesting because personally, right now I'm reading this book, Upper Country, which talks about this free town, kind of post-slavery, where there are people who are kind of being chased down and trying to be found. And I'm not going to spoil the book, but things happen. Yeah. And it's a lot of kind of the same themes that I felt like in terms of like looking back at your own history. This is an Ontario town, not in the East Coast like you, but this is, I think, such an interesting kind of subject matter for an album at this time. Like you don't have that many albums that kind of go into subject matter. Now, of course, a lot of it is autobiographical as well. But I want you to tell me, what was kind of the impetus for you to even try and have an album that, led in this direction? Because this is not what everyone else is singing about. That's clear.
No, that's facts, man. And like I want to really bring it back to like my first time I ever listened to I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to call it by its name, but Jeremy Dutcher's first record, the one that won his first Polaris Prize. That record, when I listened to it and kind of understood what it was, it's paying homage to his culture, like, you know what I mean, and really kind of bringing some of those stories and a lot of that archival, like it just blew my mind, because it's like, man, like I really wish that there was something like that. I think there is, like in terms of like the research that goes into the Black African Nova Scotian culture and the experience. Like there's documentaries and there's a lot of research, but there wasn't. I didn't feel like there was a lot of like music, like a lot of folk elements about the Black Nova Scotian experience. So it's like I just wanted to really kind of dive into my research and really dive into what it means to be Black African Nova Scotian. And it started with listening to the Jeremy Dutcher record, but then it trickled over into really kind of doing that research, my own family research. Like I've really kind of dived into like the same last name. My name is Lance Sampson, but like I was really trying to figure out like where that Sampson last name came from. And when I started digging into the research, I found out, with the migrations of the blacks in Nova Scotia, that a lot of names from these plantations were brought over here. And you know, uh, I wanted to find out like who my great grand. I want to go back as far as Sampson in my lineage as I could, and the furthest I could go back was my great grandfather's name was Daniel P. Sampson. A story of him was that he was the last person to be hanged at the Halifax courthouse for a crime that he was wrongfully convicted for, and we're in the process of exonerating him for that. We put an application for exoneration on the anniversary of his death, 90th anniversary of his death. But I wanted to find out like who his parents were, and I found out Joseph Sampson was his father, and a lady named Elizabeth Dixon was his mom, and then that like going back that far, it just kind of opened up a lot of like some of the other relatives. So if I'm going back on that side of my family, like let me try going on my grandfather, like my mom's dad, and it just really kind of brought me down this rabbit hole that opened up reading and listening to a lot, reading books and reading people's theses from their practice from university, and coming across like a lot of Black African Nova Scotian music that otherwise like nobody's looking at. And I allowed that research to really kind of catapult the writing in the process of this record. And that research actually started off, it started off with an idea of going across Nova Scotia and talking with Black elders about like, what their experiences were like growing up in these communities. Because it's like, at one point there was 50, 51 Black communities in Nova Scotia. There's not really that much anymore. I think there might be closer to like 40-ish. But it's mainly because like a lot of the people, like people are getting older, they moved out. So I just wanted to kind of travel back to these communities and really kind of understand what it was like for everybody growing up within the Black communities, and contrast my experiences with them, and just try to really understand like a lot of the stuff, man, like understand why, Black on Black violence exists in Nova Scotia, why, um, you know, uh, why I didn't understand what African Nova Scotian was when I was younger, and then trying to understand what like what parenting is, and just trying to go around and chat with people and get their experiences. And it started off with that, and that just with that, a lot of the stories and a lot of the it just manifested itself with writing songs about it. And it's been a great journey, man. It's still ongoing, and I wanted to do something different this time. Like the last record was called Don't Trip. It's kind of like host party. That's another Nova Scotian thing.
Like
Like
a
we
bouncy
like
vibe, yeah.
we like the host parties. So I was like, yo, let me do something. We can put something on the kitchen. And I really want to try to dive in to a lot of the topics and issues that I might have been facing as I was growing up, and thinking those things were normal, and just really trying to tap into figuring out like how we can change those things. And this album is hopefully an optimistic plea to get my generation of men anyways to really start looking within and change a lot of the things that we kind of grew up with that weren't necessarily the greatest.
You said look within. You have a song about that. We'll talk about that later on. Backpack was kind of like be careful what you wish for when you do that research.
You got it, boy.
I think that like that is something that we don't always want to do. I always say looking within is not always fun. Before you find out you're the problem. Before you find out you're not as smart as you think you are. So also if you're talking about, I think it is very commendable in terms of doing that work and looking at history when it may not be pretty. That's a privilege. This past year I talked a lot about it with my brothers, my parents, and us trying to talk about how far back we can go in our history. Like how far back do we know the name of this person? Forget about knowing about this, even knowing the name of who that person is. And I think the history is something that you sometimes think it doesn't matter, but what matters is what's happening now, like what have you done for me lately. But I think that in my life, because you're kind of pushing forward from what everyone has done. And I think about it in my direct lineage. My father dropped out of school when he was in middle school. Right. Now, since he's got a bunch of degrees and he's very, very above self-improvement, but his father couldn't read or write. And to think that his father couldn't read or write, he dropped out of school when he was in middle school, and I get my degrees. It's like whatever my kids are going to do is going to be a whole step past that. And I think like that's what I think when I'm talking about going back and looking at that is if you kind of have a different perspective. I know they say to measure yourself against yourself. Also, it's like you're versus your own family. It's like set the standard of okay, we're a family that does this. We're a family that we do this. So I really love that you kind of looked through all those things. I want to go back in time a little bit. Okay, let's just take it a little step back into the past. Okay,
yes, sir.
You're learning to play guitar.
Yes.
Guitar is the one instrument I'm telling you right now. If I could play guitar, I would be a menace. Keep me off the streets, okay? I'm a drummer by trade. I played keys growing up. I can still fake play keys. You put a keyboard in front of me. I can give you some chords that'll make you think I know what I'm doing. Can't play keys like I used to. That was one instrument like I could barely fake it. I could fake play bass. That was like my little party trick. You put guitar in front of me, I'll fake play bass for like 2 minutes, but past that, I gotta pass it off. So I always thought guitar was to me the instrument that I wish I could have played. You learning to play and then also songwriting, and we'll talk about that experience and just what that was like for you personally.
So boom, I learned how to play guitar. So in high school wasn't the greatest time for me. Like it took me about 5 years to graduate from high school, and it was like back and forth to like adult learning programs to actual high school. And there was this program that was it was for youth that like if you were in and out, if you had charges, because I've been in a few jails in my life, but if you had charges, if you were acting up in school, you'd go to this program called HIEX, like Higher Youth Education Center or something like that. And it was there where I first got a taste of playing guitar. So like 15, 16, I saw this guitar that they had, and I was like, can I take it home? Can I play it? And I was attempting to play it at home when I was 15 or 16, but my grandfather, God rest his soul, his name's Victor Carver, he came over, and he's someone who grew up in Africville. He's someone who learned how to play guitar. He was a folk artist. And when he saw that I had a guitar in my house, he went and played it. He was playing it, and he was tuning it, and he broke the string. And it was an opportunity. And at the time, I kind of use it as an excuse to be mad at him for that because like Long Wave was just right up the street, and I could have just went up there and got it fixed, but I was just like, yo, like I just got mad at him, and I honestly like the way I reacted it wasn't the greatest. So I didn't pick up the guitar since then. But then when I got in Spring Hill, for those who don't know, is a federal institution in Nova Scotia. Um, I feel like Collins Bay might be a federal institution, like Ontario, Toronto, but like provincial and federal is different. So my first time up in federal, I didn't know that you could rent instruments. I didn't know that there was a band room. Like there was this biker, like this Hell's Angels dude, that told me that there was a band room because he saw me playing guitar in the air, and he was like, "Yo, you want to play?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Come over here," and he showed me this secret band room that only him and somebody else knew of. And I was like, "Whoa!" But it was there where I actually had the time to hone in on like reading tabs and like just playing chords and stuff. Now, mind you, brother, like I still couldn't tell you what I'm playing. Like I can only go around and like find the certain notes that I think are gonna fit what this melody is that I have in my head. Like I don't generally know what I'm doing on the guitar. Like I just know how to fiddle around. I know how to use it as a tool for songwriting.
Like drumline.
Sure. I mean, yes, yes. But like once I learned those elements of guitar, that was to use it as a tool. Once I kind of try to apply those same practices with piano. And since I've started playing piano, like my favorite instrument I really would like to learn is piano. Like guitar was the starting point, but piano I feel like is something that I really kind of could see myself playing and learning in a way that like is really gonna be helpful for my whole mental stability. You know what I mean? And I didn't know. Like my dad, he's from Liverpool, Nova Scotia. He's a country singer. I don't know if he plays guitar, but my dad's side, all musically inclined folks. Like all my brothers, my sisters, on my dad's side, singers, songwriters. Like they just all are musically inclined. And I thought that that's where I might have gotten it from. That bug. I didn't think that it was on my mom's side until my grandmother came to a show. God rest her soul. Her name's Carolyn Sampson. She came to a show and seen me play with a band. And she looked at me. She said, "Yeah, Dad would really love this." I was like, "What? What do you mean you would love this?" Like, "Yeah, he played. He was a saxophone player. He played a clarinet. He played drums." I was like, "Well, when were you gonna tell me that?" She looked at me. She said, "You didn't ask." I was like, "Wow." So like it kind of it got passed down through the line, and I'm more moved musically. It's more with instinct. And like I don't generally know what I'm playing. I don't generally know what I'm doing, but I can hear it. I can hear where we're at. I can hear where we're at. But when it comes to like actually, putting what's in my head onto paper or to hands, like I'm not there yet. And I'd love to get there eventually.
I love that you talked about that link that kind of put you on to that you didn't even know was there. I was saying this to my little brother a couple of days ago. I said the older you get, and he's quite young, so he's not there, but the older you get, you realize you are more like your parents than you might be comfortable with.
Facts, man.
and part of growing up and maturing is not always trying to be what they weren't or what they were, but it's being like, I have this person in my DNA. This is what it is. And I think about, me being a radio host. I didn't know this until I was older, but my dad's a pastor, and he had been on the radio for years when he was young, because that's what they do in Jamaica. Like the pastor goes on the radio.
Yeah.
And I thinking about it now, and he used to be like, you don't know about me, but I used to have lyrics.
You say that's what they used to do in Jamaica? The pastors would go on the radio?
Yeah.
How old's your pops? Is he still with us?
58.
He's still with us.
Yeah, 58, yeah.
So what about his dad? Was his dad kind of also pastor too, maybe?
No, it's just him.
The reason why I'm picking this up, this detail up, because there was a pastor back in the day. I don't know if you heard of his name, Portia White. Mm-hmm. So Portia White was an opera singer. I have a record here somewhere. Actually, no, it's at the BCC. I've got a residency at the Aqaukultre Center, Nova Scotia right now. Everything's up there. But she's an opera singer, and I think that her family was from Truro, Nova Scotia, or they lived in Truro, Nova Scotia at some point. Anyway, but her dad, his name was Reverend William White, which, if you know who George Eliot Clark is, I think that's like his great-great-grandfather or something. Like he's related to him somehow. Reverend William White, he was the last person that my great-great-grandfather Daniel P. Sampson was able to see and be blessed before he had to walk to the gallows and be hung for a crime he didn't commit. But the crazy thing about Reverend William White is that he was also a number 2 construction battalion captain. For anybody who's unaware, number 2 construction battalion was an all-black battalion back in 1970. When was it? Whenever that war, World War II. I don't know. World War I. That's what it was. World War I.
Yeah.
Before the Halifax explosion, so I think it was World War I. And he was a reverend, and he was also someone who was he had a lot of acclaim because he would have these radio stations. He was broadcast nationally, and he would preach on the radio. And I found that when I learned that of him, that was pretty cool that he had that access and he was able to kind of preach his message to the world through the power of radio. And it's cool to hear that that's what Jamaican preachers and reverends would do as well. So there might be a connection there.
What a different time! What a different time. The thing that I thought about when you were talking was about like parenting and that whole thing. And you had this sentence that you had that I thought was so interesting. So when I had my daughter, I wept for the first time in almost 15 years. And I had a friend who actually just had a kid who told me the same thing. He was like, I was cool. They put the kid in my hands, and I was just leaking. I don't even know what was going on. And then you said, as she got older, I came to realize that I didn't have a true example of what fatherhood looked like. Talk about that and kind of what you've learned about yourself, through being a parent.
I've learned that I had a lot of work to do still. And yeah, like when I really thought about in the last time before our daughter was born, when the last time I cried, it was when I was a teenager. And it probably was when I was in like a lot of pain, like physical pain, because like I've had a few times in the hospital. I got 10% cerebral palsy. For a lot of folks that don't know, affects the left side of my body. I've had like really bad hernia in my life, and had a lot of surgeries throughout my life, and like that probably been the last time I cried. And I thought that through my experiences, through just like being out of the street or just like how I dealt with a lot of situations, things that I've seen in my life, I thought that I didn't have that trigger of emotion anymore. Like, and I've always questioned, like, man, like what's wrong with me? And when our daughter was born, and I saw her and she was in my hands, man, like I wept like a baby, and I was like, wow, okay, I still have there's something, I still have something in me. Yeah, I mean,
It's in there.
it's in there. I was like, okay, we're looking good, and but yeah, I also still learned like even after that, like I tended to push down that emotion and kind of try to get rid of it and not really embrace it. And I've learned through this journey of parenting that you don't have a blueprint of how to parent, and it just made me respect my mom and how she raised three babies by herself, and just understand and some of the things that I might have resentment about how she dealt with things. Is like, yo, I actually understand everything. Like I understand it. I understand like what my grandmother how because she was another person, my grandmother who had to raise babies on her own, and I was like, wow, like I understand why you guys move how you move. I get it, and I think I've learned how to be a lot more patient now that I'm a father because it's like I don't know nobody else's time but them. But also I've learned that um, that those babies are going to eventually get old enough that they're going to be doing their own thing. So like making sure that your foundation within your relationship is actually as strong as that bond with your children.
Yeah, that's a
So
good
like
one.
yeah, man, it's a beautiful journey. It's very hard, and you're kind of just like you're thrown to the wolves if you don't really have it because nobody has a blueprint. So you're just kind of learning as you go.
I call it your freestyling. Like
You're freestyling hard.
it's all a freestyle. Something I used to say to parents when I worked with kids is your kid is going to be adult longer than they're going to be a kid. I
Mhm.
know right now you're stuck in the midst of this kid being a kid, but this kid is going to be an adult way longer than they're going to be a kid.
Straight
Your
up.
job is to prep them for that.
Yeah.
They also got to still enjoy being a kid, but your job is to prep them that when they become an adult, it's not a culture shock to them. They can kind of
Yeah.
feel some kind of preparation for that. So I completely get what you're saying there. Of like, there's no blueprint. You're really just doing it. And then the other thing that I think is one of my, I guess, greatest accomplishments is that my mom told me once that I taught her what love is, and I was like
Mm,
25 when she told me this, and it was kind of saying like, seeing the way that you love me and love other people. I've never seen that before, and I'm thinking like, how can I tell my mom anything? This is my mom. Like you're the blueprint. I'm learning from you. And just from that, I learned that we all are also people. I
yeah.
think that whether you're a son, a father, a grandchild, everyone still has their own journey. And I think that like this conversation I had with my parents as I've grown up, that I think about, I'm like, oh wow, like I kind of understand everything so differently. So you saying you understand like your mother and your grandmother differently now, I totally resonate with that because there's things that I think the younger me would never understand. And like here's the example I always give people asking. My mom owns her own businesses. She's an
Hmm.
entrepreneur. She owns her own businesses, and I've helped her with her business in a bunch of different ways. Whatever I can do to help. And I remember us being at like events and her kind of being nervous to network.
Right.
Me, I talk to people for a living. This is what I do. If I can chill, I'll chill. But if we got to talk, there's no problem.
Yep.
And seeing my mom be like nervous to talk to people blew my mind because I'm like, how is that even? I'm like, she's a person. You know what I mean? Like, you can be nervous at any age. You can never age out of being nervous or anxious. So even
Yeah.
that small thing where in my mind I'm like, I think you're super cool. Like, go talk to them. They'd love to talk to you. I was like, oh my god, you are a real person. Of course, you can get anxious like anybody else.
Yeah. And like I was able, and I say my mom and my grandmother too. I was
Mm,
also really to understand like where my dad was at because like my dad wasn't around for me. So that's what I mean. Like I didn't have a big example of what even fatherhood or even like what uh like partnership was. Like
mm-hmm,
my mom has been a single lady most of what I remember her being, and
mm,
none of our fathers were really there and around choice wise. You know what I mean? They weren't the greatest men at the time either. My dad was not the greatest dude to be around, right? So I didn't have an example, so I had to trial and error, and I appreciate like the patience required to when you're doing it in the trial and error mode. So it's just like you make a lot of mistakes, and I think the best practice is to learn from those mistakes and just try to keep it moving. But the other thing is too is I also realized through this parenting journey is that holy, I am very similar to my mother. All the things that I was like, oh man, I actually, I wish my mom was this and didn't do that. And this, I was like, oh, actually, I'm the exact same way, so I can't
I'm,
really,
I can't talk. And
I can't do that.
last thing is patience, but patience with yourself. I
Yeah,
think that is one of the biggest things. Is like, it's like, you know what? And now I've done this thing wrong, or I've done this thing not how I like. I know better. Be patient with myself. I can learn. Honestly, when getting ready for this interview, I was kind of overwhelmed because you have so many songs on this album that are like
absolutely.
worth talking about. Like forget about the
Right.
songs like that are worth talking about. And I'm like, we can't make the listening or the interview longer than the album. Like we gotta have some decorum here. But I think that there's one thing on What Are You Saying, which is the intro to the album. And this is a song where I actually like sometimes more about your style than what you're actually saying in this. Because you have this like sing talk style that you do in the verses, which lends to the storytelling. I want you to talk about that choice. Because first of all, it's a very interesting intro to the project because you don't go back to it as often as you would think because it's actually really effective in the intro. We talk about that choice to have again that like sing talk style, similar to someone who we will not name, but that kind of sing talky style.
Honestly, man, like I really have to give the utmost praise and respect to the producer of this record. Her name is Erin Costello, which is a first for me to ever work with a producer in a way where it's like start to finish. We're doing this project. I've learned so much from this process, and Erin Costello has come with a lot of experience and a lot of like musical catalog. Where we listened to a lot of records together, and like it was before we even got to the studio. Like it was a 6 month process of us getting together like once a week, like once every Sunday or anytime we could, and just really kind of talk through these songs and like the impact that they might have and like how we might approach it. And so I came with most of like these songs as ideas and demos, and like we really just really sat with each other and fleshed things out, listened to a lot of records and try to get kind of like a D'Angelo kind of feel of like pulling from different influences. But in a lot of the influences that I'm pulling from are Black Nova Scotian, African Nova Scotian records. So like I really really I serve the work with this album. Like I serve the purpose and serve the message, and a lot of the direction and what you're hearing is there's a lot of instinct, but it was very like intent. You know what I mean? And that intent came with um, serving the vision of the record and the message, and really just trusting Erin Costello's process. Like it was a great experience, and so like I think that choice in what you're hearing is like it's really like Erin really coaching me into be like just kind of loosen up and just kind of try to speak it and like
Mm-hmm.
and like and just try this and try that. And at first it's like, man, like I don't know what you mean. Like for me, I don't know what you mean. So it's like I'm trying and trying and trying, and like the first, I think we were in the studio for like 10, 11 days, and the first like 5 days was just like getting the beds down and the background vocals and all that stuff, and then it was my turn, and I didn't know what to do. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, give me a day, give me 2 more days, please, give me a week with this, just let me chill. Because like for me, like this whole record is just I know how much research went into it, and I just know how much care that the whole everybody who was involved put into it, and I just wanted to do it justice. And when I first stepped up to the microphone and recorded, I was doing things that I instinctually would just do. But having that producer next to you that can really help guide that process, like it was it really what rooted the album. Like as much as this album 1783 is mine, like I really give my head off to Aaron Costello because like it was a joint effort, joint process, and you're hearing a lot of Aaron's process within these songs too. So I got to give it the E.
No, big thanks to E because I think there's a ton of songs on here, and I'm excited for everyone to hear this because there's clearly so much intention on this project. Like it is very obvious in a lot of the songs. I have a couple more songs as well before we get into our cool table questions. Okay,
Yeah.
we mentioned Bags Packed earlier. Quickly, I just want about Bags Packed and what that song is because I don't know if everyone's gonna catch it in terms of like and be careful what you wish for, but
Yeah.
I love these songs that are about topics that you don't hear very often, and that you don't hear very often in this art form. So talk about Bags Packed very quickly for the people.
I got to give you a shout out because you caught it right to gate. Like, be careful what you wish for because, like, doing the research, Nova Scotia research in general, like, there's a lot of heavy things. Like, again, like, I grew up around drugs. I grew up around sex trafficking. I grew up around abuse, like, toxic masculinity, like, all that stuff that kind of, like, you're just forced to kind of, like, leave in the like, oh, don't mind your business, mind your business. And you really dive into, you know, traumas that are happening within communities. And, like, people like Nova Scotia is so tight knit because like somebody dies because we know who it is. Like everybody knows who it is. Like someone gets shot, we know who it is. We know who did it. Everything, all that stuff. We're so closely connected to the street. It's really crazy. So it's like when you're doing a lot of that research and you find the truth, though, what do you do with it?